Okay, so the Supreme Court took up an enjoined case today that I think will solve a lot of Trump's headaches in the long run. 40 cases, 3 being heard now, that all boil down to one issue. Can a district judge issue a nationwide injunction? And the Solicitor General made a very clear argument on behalf of Trump against that today.
Forcing the government to win everywhere while the plaintiffs can win anywhere.
Folks, this is a bit wonky, but I'm going to make it easy to understand, I promise, because it is really important to understand how the left is using the system to stop Trump. Okay, in this hearing today could be the first major blow to the left's lawfare effort forever. The premise of this case applies to 40 national injunctions since Trump has taken office by district judges, 35 of which came from just 5 not-so-friendly judges like Boasberg in D.C. That's the guy who blocked the Alien Enemies Act to deport illegal gangbangers. But the 3 specific cases today are all related to birthright citizenship. Trump versus State of Washington, Trump versus New Jersey, and Trump versus CASA, okay? Let's take the last one. They're all essentially the same premise, just by different groups. Trump versus CASA is being brought by an illegal immigrant advocacy group on behalf of 5 pregnant women and other organizations to challenge Trump's removal of the birthright citizenship order under the 14th Amendment. Now, this one I got to hand to Trump. He was just like, you know what, guys, I'm so done with this. Just do it. Let's force it into the courts, see what happens. I like that. That's good. The plaintiffs, though, argue, which the merits of which are not fully being addressed today because, like the other 2 cases, the court is mainly hearing whether or not the district courts have the authority to grant relief nationwide, which in all 3 cases, the lower judges did. That's what we're hearing. So Trump's Solicitor General is essentially making the case that any relief or any decision from a judge should only apply to those 5 plaintiffs specifically in this case and not nationwide. Now, Justice Sotomayor, who was super liberal, obviously, in my opinion, she was actually completely unhinged today, even got reined in by Chief Justice Roberts.
If there was a decision that violated the precedent of the court, then the affected plaintiffs could get a separate judgment.
And
so
that
means
you're talking about the hundreds and thousands of people who weren't part of the judgment of the court.
We are not claiming that because we're conceding that there could be an inappropriate case.
Only a class, only
Can
by
I
a class.
Can I hear the rest of his answer?
Yeah, this went on for a while. Her point in that rambling thought was in support of Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court justice who can't tell us what a woman is, asking, why doesn't everyone benefit off of one person's case?
Everybody has to have a lawyer and file a lawsuit in order for the government to stop violating people's rights.
Basically, what about people who can't afford to go to court? Yes. Now, I do happen to agree that the way our court system works can be punitive, it can be arduous, and not always efficient, but it's what we got, and it's better than basically anywhere else in the world. Anyone who's been through a divorce would probably agree with me on this. Nevertheless, somehow, she is now in favor of national injunctions. The liberal justices actually all are now in favor of these national injunctions, which is weird because this is highly inconsistent with the previous standpoint in 2022 of her fellow liberal justice, Elena Kagan, when she said this.
It just can't be right that one district judge can stop a nationwide policy in its tracks and leave it stopped for the years that it takes to go through normal process.
Now, the point that I think is lost on our liberal justices here is that there's already a mechanism to enjoin a single decision from a lower court to apply it to a larger class, and it was brought up today. Rule 23 pertaining to class action lawsuits. I think it bodes very well for the Trump side in this argument here that they didn't do that. Look, you want to have a local ruling apply nationwide? Get them to join a class action lawsuit. But these parties, for the liberals, didn't do that. Okay? Now, the other part of the argument Trump's team is making is under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution. Stay with me here, folks. I'm getting a little wonky, but this is so important. You know what? Actually, it's so important to appreciate also the foresight that our founding fathers had when they constructed a single document 250 years ago, literally addressed almost every contingency of every aspect of government. Like, I am always in awe of how much our founders understood how messed up this government could possibly get, which we're here now. Anyway, Article 3, Section 2 defines the judiciary jurisdiction over cases and controversies, granting the Supreme Court original jurisdiction in cases involving ambassadors, public ministers, consuls, or states. Now, there's multiple states involved here, so that would apply. It's really important to note that people spoke differently back then, and the interpretation of the intent of the words that were written for them back then in the Constitution in plain English have been the focal point of many people's legal arguments, and this case is included in that. Look, I believe, I'm not a lawyer, I didn't even finish college, but I believe that the intent of Article 3 is that lower courts can only issue decisions that affect the party right in front of them, that are arguing the case, not cases that may occur in another state at some point with plaintiffs not specified or not even involved. Like if I get pulled over for swerving across the double yellow line in Utah and it gets thrown out because, I don't know, the sun was in my eyes, does that same precedent make me innocent in Connecticut too? No, unless the Supreme Court says so. Now, the other side of this on behalf of the migrants, okay, and I'm not arguing on behalf of them, I'm just giving you their side. They say that Article 3 intends for these federal judges to uphold the Constitution, which in their logic and what they're applying out of this should apply to every single decision and nationwide law. Basically saying, no, the 14th Amendment says born here, therefore, if you're born in Kansas, Texas, or Maine, you should be subject to citizenship anywhere else you want to go. That's their argument. So I would say, if that's the standard of the modern left, then why in 2019, and I would challenge Justice Sotomayor on this one, if you believe that, then why did no liberals support Judge Robert Benitez when he made the ruling under the same premise in California in Duncan v. Bonita? This was a case when the judge said, a federal judge, said a magazine capacity restriction violated the Second Amendment, which by the left standards is a national violation of the Constitution. Yet, with an active ruling, Washington, Delaware, Rhode Island, and Oregon all passed magazine restrictions before his ruling was stayed. Begs the question. Now, seriously, stay with me on this. This is my last point, and this is probably the most important one. Okay, to all three cases here. All of them are making the case that their plaintiffs, the illegal immigrants, are protected under the 14th Amendment, which reads, quote, all persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state where they reside. Now, the intent, if you recall, the 14th Amendment in conjunction with the 13th Amendment that ended slavery and the 15th Amendment ensuring freed slaves had the right to vote, was written immediately following the Civil War with the intent of applying citizenship to free slaves who were brought here involuntarily and were, as the amendment says, specifically subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The point I'm making, are people who came here illegally subject to the jurisdiction thereof? They broke the laws by coming here willfully, not hauled here against their will as slaves were. And then they had children, like slaves had children here, they were citizens of. But they were being brought here. They were subject to the jurisdiction of our laws involuntarily, which at the time, the laws were slavery. The argument I would make is by the same logic. I'll use the Second Amendment here, which says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But if I do not have a permit in 24 states, 26 have constitutional carry of some variation, or if I'm carrying my gun in the House of Congress or even the floor of the Supreme Court, I can be arrested. But it says the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So why can Scalia, conservative justice, described as reasonable restrictions in Heller versus D.C. apply to one right, but not to another, noting himself that rights are always absolute? Does that only apply to the Second Amendment? Because Clarence Thomas noted in the majority decision of Bruin that all rights are equal. So if you're here illegally, are you subject to the jurisdiction thereof? I would say no. Therefore, would it be unreasonable for me to say that if you are here illegally, a child born here under that same banner also does not deserve to be under the jurisdiction thereof, hence not a citizen? Would it be reasonable? Would it be a reasonable restriction to, by definition, deny an illegal alien, a criminal, by the way, by definition, their 14th Amendment rights, as many criminals, even U.S. citizens who commit crimes, are denied their Second Amendment right? Think about it. All in, I hope Trump wins this on both fronts. I think he will on the national injunction thing, but I'm just not that optimistic, unfortunately, on the birthright citizenship. I hope he does. The one thing we can take from this, we as Republicans need to do more of it. Stop worrying if it will pass constitutional muster of the courts and start executing the agenda that we believe are in line with the Constitution and its original intent. Lord knows that's what the Democrats always try to do. So sorry, with my non-legal background, that's the best I can do for you.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.